I'm delighted to be here, not as myself, but as representing the Poetry Society of Virginia, to honor someone whom we all respect and hold very, very dear in our hearts, and that's Ed Lull. The Poetry Society of Virginia, as stated by its bylaws, was first approved in 1923, that's about almost 100 years ago, was formed to encourage the writing, reading, study, and appreciation of poetry. We'll hear that again. To encourage the writing, reading, study, and appreciation of poetry. There is no doubt whatsoever that Ed has fulfilled the goals of the PSV with more heart and more dedication than anyone I know, anyone we know, placing his professional expertise, his executive talents, his writing and mentoring skills, and his devotion to poetry in the service of these goals. We know that Ed came to poetry later in life than most poets. After a long and successful career as a naval officer and a business executive. But there is some advantage to making life-altering decisions later in life. I can tell you from experience, since Bill and I were not married in our teens. And we've been married more than 30 years and very happily. When you discover a treasure, whether it's love or it's poetry, later in life, you make up for it with intensity and enthusiasm that is often unmatched by youth. You think of all the things you learned and apply whatever might be relevant. You discern and you pick and you choose and you remain focused on the goal. I will not take the time to enumerate all of Ed's many accomplishments in the service of poetry, but to mention a few. He served as PSV president fruitfully for years. He was responsible for bringing the annual festival to Williamsburg and led it on many occasions with repeated success. He initiated the Saturday Poetry Series, the only such reading and the longest of such readings in our area, ensuring that new poets and lovers of poetry were drawn to it, either as listeners or as presenters. He has mentored numerous writers through various poetry groups, and all the while he has been writing and publishing his own work. It started with a book called Cabin Boy to Captain, a sea story, a historical novel in blank verse, which that's my favorite. I think that is really, really an impressive accomplishment. And then he's got Where Giants Walked, Bits and Pieces, among other works. And then he has also Creating Form Poetry, which I recommend to anyone who wants to explore form poetry, because he actually illustrated each form with his own work, and that only somebody who is a true lover of poetry would do something like that. And so I know I'm leaving out many of his achievements in poetry, but I will end here so that we can proceed with the important part of this ceremony. Ed and Evelyn, would you come up? And maybe your family too, your sons. On behalf of the Poetry Society of Virginia, I'd like to present to you the Lifetime Award for Visionary Guidance as Poet and Leader on behalf of the Poetry Society and a very, very grateful community of poets. Thank you.
That is beautiful. Listen. I've, as you know, been kind of sidelined a lot lately. And part of the thing with my voice that you hear now, it's not my normal voice, but it's part of the illness. But anyway, I would like to say a couple of words anyway, and I certainly thank, excuse me, I certainly thank Sophie and the Poetry Society of Virginia as a whole for the honor, and it's very well received. I really appreciate it. My working career really is divided into three parts, all just about 20 years. A 20-year Navy career where many of you know I was a submarine officer, and then after retiring from the Navy, I went into the small high-tech companies in the Washington area that do consulting for back to the military, normally referred to as Broadway bandits. Anyway, and I did that for about 20 years. I was in 5 different companies and had the opportunity to serve and to learn a lot about the technical side of the business. And then we moved down here in retirement, and I was, I think, 64 years old when I took a course at the Christopher Wren Association called Basic Poetry Writing. Is that what we call it? Anyway, and teaching that course was a woman named Rita Durant, and she at the time was not only doing that course, but she was also a vice president for the Eastern region of the Poetry Society of Virginia. Anyway, Rita got me into after the course was over, got me into the Williamsburg Poetry Guild. And anyway, that's when really started writing poetry for serious, and it was something that caught on very well. And when her tour as VP Eastern Region ended, she convinced me to run to relieve her, which I did. And then 6 months later, the president of the Poetry Society resigned. And according to our bylaws, one of the vice presidents is supposed to fill in till the next election. And anyway, the executive committee put me in as acting president of the society. And it was interesting because I hadn't even started writing poetry 2 years before. And I kind of sensed there was a little agitation at my appointment there as president, when some people had been in the Poetry Society for 50 years. And who's this guy? So anyway, but being head of the Poetry Society was not so much the quality of your poetry, but it was a thing of leadership. And every position I'd been in since I got out of the Naval Academy had some form of leadership associated with it. So anyway, I was comfortable with it. And anyway, I think most of you know what we did and where we went with it. But the couple of things about being in the Poetry Society that I must say stand out as things that I particularly enjoyed. And one of them was establishing a good, solid relationship with the VATE organization, Virginia Association of Teachers of English. And I worked with them and finally joined VATE, even though I wasn't a teacher, but they were happy to take my dues. And I had the opportunity to put on poetry programs for them at their annual writers conference, which they held in October every year. And some of you, in fact, appeared there and did some poetry work for them, and they always seemed to enjoy that. But they have a program called WRITE, W-R-I-T-E. I bet you could have spelled that. Anyway, it's Writing Relevance in Teaching English. And through that, I got to travel around and make presentations in schools. And the association with the teachers and the students was a very happy experience for me. I visited schools in 4 out of the 5 of the Poetry Society region, that's right, we call it the region. Okay, but anyway, that was a very enjoyable thing. I think most of all, I really enjoyed the job of president of the Poetry Society. As I say, I was comfortable with the responsibilities, and we started a number of things and had a lot of fun with it. And so anyway, many of you were in the Poetry Society back then. And anyway, so much for that. Let me just conclude by saying how much this means to me to have you all show up for it. And the other thing I want to talk about briefly was starting the doing the workshop at the Christopher Wren Association was interesting to me because I was doing what my mentor had done. And anyway, since then, out of those programs that were run, we had a lot of people who have joined us on and off anyway as members of our new James City Poet group, which we have a lot of fun. Thank you again, Sophie. Thank you all for this honor.